This episode is presented by Prize Picks. Be sure to download the app today. Use the code JUICE to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Well, guys, here we are, another losing season for the Indianapolis Colts, another playoff drought, the fourth straight season the Colts will likely miss the playoffs. So wanted to bring on a friend of the show from Horseshoe Huddle, does all the stuff over there, Sports Illustrated. Of course, I'm talking about Drake Wally. Drake, wow. I mean, dude, good to have you on, first off. That's about the only good thing that we're probably going to say today. A lot of bad for the Colts right now. And, man, there's just it feels like there's so much to be said about this team and about this organization that goes even beyond this Denver game. It's just so much of a microcosm of what's been going on for the past, 3, 4, 5, 8 years that the Colts have had it. If you noticed the number there, you'll know who I'm talking about exactly. But Drake, man, how you doing considering what we saw on Sunday from the Colts? That absolutely pathetic performance in so many ways, and game you had to have. Now Colts, again, really with 3 games to go, really not a whole lot to play for. Really draft position's about it right now. But how are you feeling, man, about this team and just the direction of this team moving forward?
I feel fine. I think that especially after this performance, they had a lead, they had a good position in this game where there was some success ahead, and an absolute collapse. From a coaching standpoint, from an execution standpoint, you could even look at Anthony Richardson to an extent and say, there was a collapse from his performance. The right side of the offensive line from the center on collapsed also. So there was just this game was a microcosm of a lot of the issues that the Indianapolis Colts have right now. So I think that my feeling is, you are unsure, and that sucks to hear, but you're unsure of the future of this franchise, but you do still need to invest in Anthony Richardson. I think that the quarterback is such a premium position in this league that when you find a guy that has his skill set, you got to figure out how to build around him while you have him on that rookie contract. But Cody, unfortunately, there's a lot more questions than answers after this loss. So
it is, man, and I think one of the more unfortunate things is, the guys that are out there making those critical mistakes are basically the pillars of your team. They're the foundational guys. They're your captains out there, and they're the ones making the biggest mistakes. They're the ones dropping the ball, at the 1-yard line, and taking off. They're racing 7 points right there, killing your momentum. They're the guys that are fumbling the ball, dropping passes. They're the guys that are missing tackles, even though the defense definitely was far from the issue. There's just so much, man. And I think it just stems from, and I think you even saw it, Drake, in a lot of ways. I just do feel like going back to what Kenny Moore said weeks ago now, with all this crap that's been going on this year, I think it's very evident that this locker room, there's a lot of issues going on with this team, this locker room, just this organization in general, where it just seems like there's a lot going on behind the scenes that maybe we're not, hearing all the time. But it just seems like with how the team has failed to perform at times this year, and especially in the biggest of moments, this team has failed to do it year after year. I mean, even going back to the last couple of years. I mean, you talk about 2021, with the epic collapse that we obviously saw there. You talk about 2022, just the collapse of the entire season for the Colts. And then last year, the Colts right in that one, and then they blow that game too. And then, of course, this Denver game. Colts are in this one for really 3.5 quarters, and then all of a sudden the wheels fall off, and everything, they're done. Everything's screwed up. The wheels fall off for them. And so there's so much with this team, man, that I just feel like there's so much more deeper beyond the surface with this team. But I think the thing that is very evident in a lot of ways is this locker room has a lot of issues right now. It seems like there is a lack of accountability, and there's a lack of a lot of things that winning organizations and winning cultures have. What are your thoughts?
That sounds like probably the worst issue that a franchise can have. Honestly, Cody, it takes you back to the 2022 season, especially when you would hear guys like Quentin Nelson or just anybody like our own Jake Arthur would say, like, back in that season, I remember walking in there and you just felt like the locker room was lost. You just felt it. You could you could kind of feel that tension or that lack of, or whatever that feels like, but it's distinctive. I think that you bringing up Kenny Moore's comments is fantastic, because later on he would be like, oh, hey, blah, 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 blah. He like kind of covered his tracks a little bit. But you saw actually our own Jake Arthur asked him about that. You saw the conviction. You saw the honesty. You saw him almost say, you know what, the hell with it. I'm going to say it. kind of thing. And when a player opens up like that, it's usually not complete bullcrap, especially when it comes from a guy who's a captain, and he's been tenured with this team since like 2018, I think, or 2017, out of Valdosta State, for God's sakes. Okay, so Kenny Moore is entrenched in the Indianapolis Colts culture, and so for him to say that, I love that you brought that up again, especially after this loss, because now you have to talk about that. Is this a culture issue? Is this a locker room issue? Where does it start? Who needs to answer for it? Again, Cody, it would have been great to get a win, because that usually cures everything in the NFL. But now you have a lot of questions, and it would have been different if it was, and I remember Andrew Moore brought this up. He goes, if it would have been like 31-28, last second field goal loss, so kind of tight battle, you're like, okay, there's reason to be optimistic in this loss. They fell apart, bro. They fell apart. They looked like crap. They looked like complete shells of themselves, from the coaches to the quarterback to the off. Everybody looked, outside of the defense, looked really bad. So I just think that, I don't know, man. I think if it's a locker room issue, it's very interesting, and it will be interesting to see where the blame is put for that issue, I think.
Yeah, man, I think you're spot on. I mean, I just think the biggest question is who is to blame here, because there's been so much going on, in the last couple of years. And my mind immediately goes, and I know a lot of Colts fans' minds immediately go to Chris Ballard, right? Because, year 8, losing record, you haven't made the playoffs since 2020 with a 40-year-old quarterback, and you haven't won the division. And there's so many other things you could throw in there. It feels like just every single year there is mediocrity. It's like that almost is the standard now. You kind of saw it reflected in the way the Colts have addressed free agency really ever since Chris Ballard has been here, in a lot of ways, in certain ways. And I know obviously free agency doesn't cure all. I mean, you see teams that go and dip into free agency all the time and it doesn't work out. I mean, the Tennessee Titans, for example, prime example of that. But also in the same way, there are ways where you're like, this Colts team could have gotten better, but they chose not to. That they could have added more pieces, added more help around their quarterback. Or if, even if, I know some people are high on AR, some people aren't. But, there are other opportunities they could have gotten quarterbacks too. Like, they could have done all these things, but this is the route that they chose to go, right? And this is where the Colts stand right now. Again, losing record, 4th straight year of missing the playoffs. So I think a lot of people would point to Chris Ballard, and just, it seems like it doesn't matter who the head coach is. He's had 3 now that he's been. Again, Pagano, you don't really count that one, but technically he's had 3 coaches, and it's been pretty much the same result. It's ended with the same sort of standard kind of being upheld, and it's not been a good standard. It's been really a standard of mediocrity and an occasional, playoff, appearance or playoff potential berth like last year. So, man, that's what some people are thinking. What are you thinking when it comes to Chris Ballard and just his track record, honestly, so far, 8 seasons in, and here we are sitting here again, with a 6-8 record this year.
I think initially, you look back, right, and you're like, okay, you got a guy who inherited, or well, not inherited, but he got the team in 2017. Luck doesn't really play, right? You have Brissett. You go into 2018, you get Luck a full year, you make the playoffs. You win in the wild card round, you three-peat against the Texans, and you lose to Pat Mahomes. Okay. Then Luck retires. I think that is such a unique situation for a general manager. I don't really know if there's been a situation where that's happened, where your star quarterback just bye. It's pretty rare. But like you mentioned, there were opportunities to get quarterbacks, right? You can't look back and say, oh well, no. Classes 2020, 2021, 2022. None of those classes had any winners, right? You can't, it's very difficult to make that argument. But I just think that at this point now, you're looking at Chris Ballard like, okay, you've got your quarterback, Anthony Richardson, you've got your general manager, Chris Ballard, and the mediocrity just weirdly continues. It's like it's a team that's not horrific enough to get the highest of level draft picks. I guess they did get Anthony Richardson, but they're not consistently that bad, right? Like they're not going to get that kind of pick with 6 wins. They're just not. They might get a higher pick, but they're not. They're probably going to end up with like 8 wins. So it's like one of those things where you look at another season like that, and then you're also looking at you're not winning anything. You're not even getting to the playoffs. The last time you got to the playoffs was with Phillip Rivers in his literal last season as an NFL quarterback. So there's just so many questions as to what is Chris Ballard's approach really? I think the question you have to ask is, what is Chris Ballard's approach accomplishing for the Indianapolis Colts franchise? What is it going to accomplish for Richardson? And how much longer can it continue if it doesn't work before something changes?
Right. It seems like it's the same thing over and over, and you get the same results. I mean, Drake, to be honest, it's a definition of insanity. Like the literal definition is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results.
Right.
But it's going to be the same results, right? And that's what it's been with the Colts. It's the same results. It's constant disappointment, constant underachievement, and just constant mediocrity. And it just seems like under Chris Ballard, the Colts have been a franchise of mediocrity. They haven't won anything under Chris Ballard. And they've won one playoff game, one single playoff game, and that was with Andrew Luck. Besides that, they haven't done anything. And they still, there's still so many questions around the franchise quarterback. And again, I believe that Anthony Richardson can become a good quarterback. I believe Sunday definitely wasn't a good indication of that. But I think you've seen some positive steps this year. Again, still a long way to go. I think he has the potential to be one, but it's not a slam dunk. It's not a sure thing. And, here you are sitting here. There's just so much more questions than answers when it comes to this organization and just where this team's going. And like you said, it leads you to ask a lot of questions of why. Why do we believe that Chris Ballard, he hasn't done it in 8 years as a general manager? Why do we believe now, next year will be the year? When's it going to end? You can make all these excuses all you want, but at the end of the day, it's a result-oriented business. And if the results aren't there, then he shouldn't be the GM. I mean, honestly, like if we, in our jobs were to do the same type of stuff that Chris Ballard was doing, when the results were as poor as they were, we wouldn't have jobs anymore, Drake. We wouldn't have jobs. I mean, honestly, what GM has in 8 years has had that kind of track record and lasted? It's a very short list, if any list at all. That's how it's been, man. And, I hate calling for people's jobs, but that's kind of where we're at, man. It's like the results haven't been there, and I don't know what else you need, what other further proof you need at this point, other than that there's a core issue in the 8 years, that the Colts have been mediocre. And I think that's been the common denominator in a lot of ways.
Well, the 2024 NFL season for the Indianapolis Colts is in full swing. And with that, wanted to share the sponsor of today's video, Prize Picks.
When it comes to Prize Picks, this is going to be a great way for you guys, especially, to check out some of the stuff that Prize Picks has.
You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You heard me right. Only 4 correct picks. You can win 100 times your money, guys, on Prize Picks. Be sure to sign up today and get $50 off instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. So, for example, if you think that Michael Pittman Jr. is going to have, over 80 yards this next week, or do you think Jonathan Taylor is going to have another performance of 80-plus yards rushing, you might be sitting pretty good with where you feel like the Colts are right now.
So if you're looking specifically for the Colts stuff, that's definitely something you guys should check out. But if you're looking for, like me, more NFL stuff, there's all sorts of stats and stuff that you can check out and make your picks And there's definitely guys that are very consistent, like Jonathan Taylor against the Houston Texans, that you really feel like you can probably feel pretty good about overall, right? And there's some other ones where you're like, I don't know if I would take the over on that. I don't know if I would pick them to hit that margin, right? So, guys, be sure to go check out all that stuff on Prize Picks. It's only a couple examples. There's all the different odds that you could hope for when it comes to that for Prize Picks. So highly encourage you guys to go check that out, but definitely excited for this season. And hopefully you guys will be following along with us and everything with Prize Picks and what they do.
So be sure to download the app today. Use the code JUICE to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code JUICE to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Like I said, guys, it's a great way to continue to stay in with week to week life of the NFL, specifically with your favorite team, the Indianapolis Colts. So be sure to do that. Be sure to check out Prize Picks. And remember, Prize Picks, run your game.
Yeah, and Ballard has done great in certain areas, but they've been like weird areas. It's the round 4, 5, 6, and 7 picks. Awesome. Like Jalen Jones, fantastic find. Guy like Jalen Carley's, fantastic find. Arguably, maybe even in a couple years, your best overall linebacker. But it's not taking a swing in free agency at times. It's not loosening the purse strings a little bit, to maybe bring in some extra talent. I will say that one of the biggest areas that they tried to get Brock Bowers. They really did. They tried to get Brock Bowers. But man, one of the biggest faux pas of this entire roster, Cody, it's got to be the tight ends. What a collapse of efficiency. The tight ends, I don't even think collectively, between Mo Alley-Cox, Kylan Granson, Drew Ogletree, and Will Mallory, I don't even think they collectively have more catches at this point, 15 games in, are they 14 games? Yeah, they're 14 games in. 14 games in than Kylan Granson had all of last season. I think he had like 32, 33 catches. Tight ends are just it's another microcosm of certain areas of where Chris Ballard hasn't addressed. He's really big on offensive line, really big on defensive line. Other areas, though, it's like he can't draft certain positions. He can draft certain positions. He's just not completing his job as a general manager. And I think that it's starting after 8 years. It's finally starting to show the cracks. So,
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, Drake, put yourself in the owner's shoes for a second. You're Jim Irsay. You got to make some decisions after this year. 3 more games left. I know it's a very loaded question, but what do you do? Where do you go from here? I mean, honestly, what is the move? If you're sitting here right now as Jim Irsay, season that you have 3 games to go. Do these 3 games, number one, these 3 games indicate anything to you? Do they matter? And number 2, depending on that, what do you do?
So, if I was the owner of the Indianapolis Colts, I would tell Chris Ballard, look, you need to win these last 3 games. We've got to win. And I might even start with Steichen in that regard because of some of the absolutely god-awful play calls in the game against the Broncos. Maybe you start with Shane Steichen and you say, look, man, you need to win these last 3 games. You've got the Titans, you've got the Giants, you've got the Jags. Got to win these last 3. We've got to finish 9-8. Okay. Even because there's still the slimmest little just tiniest razor thin playoff chances. Okay. You need to act like you got to win all these games because you do. Okay. So I would start with Steichen. Then I would say to myself, actually, if this team finishes 7-10 somehow, 8-9, I would pressure Chris Ballard. I think I'll go with the answer of what I think would happen, not what I would do. Okay. Because everybody knows what we would all do in this situation with that question. I think that he'll give him another season. And I think that he's going to really pressure him like we got to do something in 2025 with year 3 of Richardson and Steichen. And if stuff starts falling apart, I mean, you might see a midseason change. Who knows? We've seen Irsay do that with the head coach before. So don't put it past him. Okay, he'll do it if he feels embarrassed enough. So we'll see, man. But I think Ballard still has at least another year. So.
Yeah, as much as Colts fans don't want to hear that, it might be a reality. Now, again, if the team continues to look like they did, who's to say they're going to win the final 3 games? I mean,
I think everybody's jobs might be on the line in that regard if they just fall apart.
And I think some people would be like, fine, if that's what it takes for a complete reset, I'm good with that, And I understand that. You never want to root for a loss, but when the playoffs are, like you said, very razor thin, I mean, it's under 10% at this point. At this point, it's like, I mean, draft position is the most important thing, as much as everybody hates it. I mean, draft position and your young quarterback, those are the 2 things that matter the most. So that's what's going to be so important and so interesting to see over these last 3 games. Because if the Colts go 0-3 or even 1-2 against opponents that you should not even be in these games, like you should win these games handedly, if you're truly a playoff contender, if the Colts don't do that, yeah, I very well could see them making some changes. But again, it really will depend on how the Colts finish out and respond in this season. And man, I tell you what, if they look like they did in that 4th quarter and really that second half, I mean, I don't know, man. Anything's possible at this point.
Yeah, and I do think there's still reason to be excited. I mean, there's so much talent on this team. I just think that I really love the fact that you brought up Kenny Moore's comments, because if we'll say if, because we don't know definitively, right, Cody? If there's a locker room issue, you're not going to see better on-field play. I mean, you might see a win against a bad team, but holy cow, if there's an actual locker room issue going on, or some kind of work ethic issue, or some kind of thing that Kenny Moore had referenced where it sounded like he basically said in a nutshell, tell me if you think I'm wrong. He basically said, there's certain guys in this locker room that don't take this job very serious. Mm-hmm. That's basically what it kind of translated to. If that's the truth, it's no wonder you're losing, right? It's no wonder you're falling to teams like, guess what? The Bills, the Lions, and the Broncos. All 3 of those teams are playoff contenders. A couple of those are Super Bowl contenders. In fact, the Lions and the Bills just put on a show today of 2 Super Bowl contenders. The Colts can't beat teams like that. Okay, so maybe the locker room issue is translating to that, but we'll see, man. At the end of the day, I think you have a lot to play for in these last 3 games, and it's going to also tell us a lot about what this team is willing to put out on the field, even if playoff hopes might be at a minimum.
Yep. I guess we'll have to see. Well, Drake, appreciate you coming on, talking a little bit. It's never fun to talk about a team like this when it's very obvious this team is not a good football team, and they're very frustrating. I mean, they're very hot and cold. You jump out to a 10-0 lead, and then at some point seemingly go ahead 20-7, and then all that crap happens, and you lose. You get blown out. Essentially, that's what it looks like. So just a very frustrating team. And you're right. I mean, this team certainly does have talent. I mean, this team – well, you can argue certain talent in certain positions, like did he allocate to certain areas? I understand that. I mean, there still is, from a pure talent standpoint, there is talent on this roster. So it's not like a Ryan Grigson roster where there literally was no talent at all and guys that will not be in the league. Like there is talent, but I think it goes beyond just talent. There's a lot more potentially under the surface for this team. So, but do appreciate you hopping on, man, talking about this a little bit. Why don't you tell everybody where they can find you, find your work, and everything you're doing over there?
Yeah, all the written work is at Indianapolis Colts on SI.com. I'm on X at DWalsterDrake. We're at Colts on SI.com, and we have the Horseshoe Huddle on YouTube. But also, man, if you guys haven't followed Bring the Juice, I mean, what the heck are you guys doing? Please go follow Bring the Juice. Also, Cody and Derek do absolutely immaculate work. So
appreciate you, man. Yeah, you as well. You guys do great stuff over there. So be sure to go check them out, guys. But that'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, guys, go Colts.